Hi, I'm Nick, and I don't know if you're like me, but personally, I experience God when I'm out in His creation. Sometimes that's just a regular walk through the neighborhood, sometimes that's a hike, but one of my favorite places to be is at the beach, whether it's hiking up to see a view or it's actually in the ocean water. I know some people think it's crazy to be in the beach at the Oregon coast, it's very cold, but I love it. And actually, I wanted to share a recent story where I experienced God in His creation. Last week, I had the opportunity to go to San Diego, California. And I don't know how you feel about California, but I feel great about the sun. And there's also a beach. And so those two things together, what could be greater? I had the opportunity, though, to kayak on the ocean. I've never kayaked on the ocean before. I've kayaked on lakes and ponds and things. But I got to kayak at La Jolla Beach Ecological Reserve. I had tour guides and they would take us out. We got to go out on the ocean. We had to go over some waves. It was kind of fun. Like there was a couple points where the guides were like, oh no, these people are not good on kayaks. We might get overrun by the waves. And they're yelling at us to paddle hard directly into the waves so we don't have the wave break over us. And I had a blast. But once we got out on the water past where the waves are coming in, our guides they turned us around and they started to tell us about the bay and the region around the reserve. And one of the things they showed us was the Rose Canyon fault line. And it's one of the few fault lines, if you know what a fault line is, it's what creates earthquakes. There's plates and they move around and they create the vibrations that shake the earth. And most fault lines are deep under the water or deep under the earth's crust, but this fault line is visible from the ocean. You can see it and you can see the bay, and they explain that this area is kind of just slowly sinking in over time. And they show us all these multi-million-dollar houses up on this cliff, and they explain that all of these houses are expected to fall into the bay within the next 50 to 80 years. And our guides go on to tell us that because this is an ecological reserve, if your house falls into this ocean, you will be fined $25,000 a day until you can get all of the debris out of the ocean, because it's equivalent to mass littering. The houses can still be purchased, but you can't get insurance in any way, and you have to go through a really extreme process beforehand to prove that you have the money in case your house falls into the bay. You have the money to get everything out. And while we're looking at all these houses, we're just like, wow, like these houses are amazing, but like you'd have to be crazy to buy a house like that could fall. And our guide says, okay, then you see over kind of by that pink house with the 3 windows, there's like a space that's really clear and open. That used to be their guest house. And she explains that this guest house had fallen into the bay and they'd had to pay the $25,000 a day fine. But it's not just the fine. They had to pay for a helicopter team to get the big pieces out. They had to pay for scuba divers to go down and make sure everything was clear. And when it was all said and done, the cost of paying for that guest house to fall into the La Jolla Beach was around $850,000. And when I heard that, I'm sitting out on the ocean, looking at this beautiful view, and I just felt like God really met me there. And the words that came to my mind were actually from the scriptures. In Luke, in chapter 14, at this point, Jesus is going around and he's preaching about the kingdom of heaven. And here he's talking about the cost of being a disciple. He says, whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, this person began to build and wasn't able to finish. And the other words I thought of is when Jesus talks about the importance of building on a solid foundation and building on the rock. And I think about these people that built those houses and have purchased those houses over the years. One, it seems foolish that you would buy a house that's not built on a solid foundation. But the other thing that I thought of is that process that they have to go through to make sure they have the money to cover the cost in case something happens. And they have to make sure that they've counted the cost of, if this house falls in, I will pay the price. And as I was sitting out there and thinking about Jesus' words, here he's talking about building a new house, building a new life, whatever it may be. But really what he's talking about is anything that you can think of is worth it for the sake of being my disciple. The cost of being my disciple outweighs anything there's nothing of value that supersedes being a disciple of Jesus Christ. And as we finally, you're like, okay, we got to go back into the Bay. Your time is up of your tour. And I was like, oh, I could live out here forever. As we're kind of going back in, I started to think of a song that I have heard many times. And I just want to share this. And I would pray that this would be true for us. This would be our stance. And the song is called Crowns, if you'd like to look it up, and it's by Hillsong. But this is from the chorus. My wealth is in the cross. There's nothing more I want than just to know his love. My heart is set on Christ, and I will count all else as loss. For the greatest of my crowns means nothing to me now, for I counted up the cost, and all my wealth is in the cross. I just pray that that would be true for us today, and that anything that we think is too valuable to let go of, we would recognize it's no value in comparison to being a disciple of Jesus Christ.